So what is leadership? Here's some great definitions. I love all of these. Richard Foster says, leadership is found in becoming the servant of all. It's a great definition. Two definitions by Oswald Sanders, who wrote an incredible book on leadership. I think I've read it 4 times. He says, true greatness, true leadership is achieved not by reducing men to one service, but in giving oneself in selfless service to them. Love that concept. Another one, same author, leadership is influence. I've heard that many times. The ability of one person to influence other people. Henry Blackaby, in his great book on leadership as well, says this: Christian leaders who know God and know how to lead in a Christian manner will be phenomenally more effective in their world than even the most skilled and qualified leaders who lead without God. Spiritual leadership is not restricted to pastors and missionaries. I love that concept and specific idea around leadership. Robert Clinton, who wrote a great book on leadership, said the central task of leadership is influencing God's people toward God's purposes. Influencing God's people toward God's purposes. John Stott, maybe you don't know, really well-known leader, probably died 10, 15 years ago in London, England. He said this: Christian leadership appears to break down into 5 main ingredients. 1, clear vision. 2, hard work. 3, dogged perseverance. 4, humble service. And 5, iron discipline. I'll say those 5 again because I just think they're gold. 1, clear vision. 2, hard work. 3, dogged perseverance. 4, humble service. And 5, iron discipline. Those are really, really important ingredients for leadership. And then the last one is this: the function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. I love that definition. The function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. Think about, just off the cuff thought, think about what Jesus did. Jesus, now I'm not saying events are bad. At Bayside, we have massive events. But what Jesus did to change the world is he invested in future leaders. He invested in people. People investing in people reach people. And I just think that's such an important concept as we're thinking about this whole idea of leadership. So those are some great definitions and concepts around leadership. But then oftentimes when we talk about leadership, we give great concepts and definitions, and look at the person of Jesus. Look how he's a servant. Look how he equipped future leaders. But then there's often this blurriness defining, how do I get there? How do I become a equipper of people? How do I influence people? How do I have a clear vision? How do I form leadership in myself so that I can form a culture of leadership in the places and spaces where God has called me? And I think there's really 3 key parts of leadership development. Write these down and then we'll get into kind of the nuance of each of them. Number 1, learning to lead yourself. That's the beginning of leadership. Number 2, learning to lead others. That's a whole different art and skill. And number 3, learning to lead leaders. So I'll say those again. Number 1, learning to lead yourself. Number 2, learning to lead others. And number 3, learning to lead leaders. Each of those are important stages in the progression of leadership. But out of all 3 of those, the most important is number 1. I played sports as a kid, through high school, in college. And whatever sport you're doing, I ran track. I should have ran in college because I think I was better at that than basketball. But I also played basketball, and that's what I did in college. Any sport, the most important things in a sport are the fundamentals. The greatest players in history, the greatest players in college, the greatest players in professional sports are the ones who have mastered the fundamentals. And I think sometimes in leadership, we're so focused on all the people and the limelight and the crowds and the success of leadership that we actually aren't practicing the fundamentals every single day. You want to know the fundamental in your leadership? It's leading yourself. This is the baseline, the foundation, the essence of leadership is learning to lead yourself. There's so many people that are like, I just want to lead people. I want to lead 100 students. I want to lead 200 young adults. Like, I want to lead all these college students. And they're so intentional in developing that they never think about, how do I lead myself well? How do I actually build a consistency in the framework of the most important areas of my life so that as I grow in my leadership influence, I can handle it and do it well because I've led myself well. So there's a number of parts to this. I'm just going to throw out a bunch of stuff. So just write it down. This literally, when I teach a class on this, I do a week at a time and 2 hours at a time per area. So lead yourself would be 2 hours. But I'm just going to throw out a lot of stuff for you guys. So you may ask, what does it look like to lead myself? First of all, it looks like this conference becoming something. You need to form something in your life so that you can lead people well. And I think that the foundations of what we're forming are things like this: formation of your heart. What is it? As God peers into my heart or your heart, what is the state of the inner sanctuary of a human being, of that central, most influential place and space that God has put inside of us? What's the state of our heart in relationship to God, in relationship to people, in relationship to my motives of why I do what I do? This is a really, really important part of forming who you are and leading yourself. Another part of this is forming your values. What are your values? If somebody randomly said to you, what are your values as a person? Not as a leader, but as a person, what would you say? Would you be able to describe and articulate the values that you have in life, the foundational character that you're aspiring to in the future? I think this is so important to be able to nail down, what are my values, as a person? Who do I want to be as a leader? How do I want to interact with people? What is the foundation and essence and ethos of my life that I'm going to lead out of? And then the formation of your motives. Why do you do what you do? Is it for the crowd? Is it for the limelight? Is it for the pats on the back? Is it because it makes you feel good that people are following you? Or do you have a simplicity and healthy motive in your soul to love people and serve people in the way of Jesus? And that's it. Not other things clouding and maligning the healthy motives that we're supposed to have as leaders. I think another part of leading yourself is forming your identity. Who am I? The question that every youth is asking and struggling with and trying to figure out as they're living their life and learning about themselves as a human being. If you're going to lead people into identity, you have to have a solid understanding of your own identity as a person. And identity isn't just, here's all the things that God says about me in Scripture. Yes, those are foundational. But identity is also, how has God specifically wired me? What are the giftings and the personality and the passions and the experiences that God has given me collectively forming who I am? And what are those experiences in my family of origin or people that I grew up around that had an influence on who I've become positively and negatively that I need to assess as a person and follower of Jesus so that I can have a healthy idea and assessment of my identity? There's so much in there that is core to leading yourself. And again, I vouch to say in Western culture that we're so focused on talent and gifting in tossing leaders into the leadership sphere that rarely do you have a young leader that's I know who I am. I know my identity. I know my values. I know the motives in which I serve. I know the state of my heart. I understand my calling, but I understand the heart of my calling. And this is because we put the cart before the horse. We're you're charismatic, you're gifted, you like kids, or you like youth, or you like college students. Let's just throw you in. Instead of saying, let's actually walk through who you are. let's actually care more about the person than the gifting, more about the person than the successes they can offer in this particular area that we need help in ministry. I think that's Jesus. Jesus spent 3 years forming the character and identity of his disciples, and then he sent them out. Something brilliant about that. Like, Jesus knew what he was doing, right? So I think that's so important in our own life to say, wow, like, it's not just about getting out of the gate fast. It's about building a foundation for myself so that when I lead and as I lead, I can do it in a healthy way. And I actually know the overflow of which I'm leading out of. I think the other part of this is just like, can I just say this? Like, get reps. Like, get reps. Like, in leading yourself, just get reps. I remember being 17 years old, started teaching the Bible in my high school, and had no idea what most of the Bible meant. Wasn't a great Bible student because I didn't grow up in the church, and so it was all new to me, but I just felt like I needed to make a difference on my high school campus. And I just started teaching the Bible, and any opportunity I got, I took. 2-year-olds, I'll take it. 1st through 3rd, I'll take it. 4th through 5th, I'll take it. Middle school, I'll take it. High school students, I'll take it. College, I will take any opportunity to develop my gifts as I possibly can get. And I think there's something beautiful in that. Nate and I were just talking and chatting. And we were talking about how many years it took us to feel comfortable in our own skin as leaders teaching. Like, really knowing ourselves, knowing our personality, being comfortable, not trying to be like somebody else. And both of us were like, it took at least 15 years. At least 15 years. I mentioned Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule because, first of all, the 10,000 hour rule, if you haven't heard about it, you can look it up on Google and you'll learn about it real quick. But basically, that to be really skilled at your craft, you need 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours of reps in the grind, just doing it and figuring it out and figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at, figure out who you are and who you're not, and just developing that skill over time. Because honestly, when we start, we really don't know ourselves well. And we're trying to figure out our voice and our leadership style, not somebody else's voice and somebody else's leadership style. So you have to lead yourself by just taking opportunities, and just don't take opportunities. Here's what I would do. People that are ahead of you, people that are mentoring you, people that are above you maybe in the workplace that have had a lot more time and opportunities to develop their craft, you invite them into helping you grow. I think growth is an invitation. Sometimes when we look at discipleship and mentorship, we think we force ourselves into people's lives. I found that to be not great. What I find to be great is inviting people into that. Like saying, hey, I'm available. If you want feedback, if you want me to help you to grow in this, like I'm available and I'd love to do that for you. But if not, no worries at all. I think the invitation is important because a person has to want that themselves for it to be effective. So I think when you're getting your reps, ask really skilled people around you for feedback to help you grow. Because it will help you to see things. Maybe it would take you 4 or 5 years to see because you're not fully aware. If one person says that thing to you early on, that will save you 5 years in the process. Like such a blessing and such a gift. And I think part of leading yourself is just being coachable. Being willing. Coachability was not a big deal to me because I grew up playing sports. I was at times really good at what I did. And every day I'd be coached. Like, you're not doing this good. You need to get better at this. You need to fine tune this. And I was so used to that now in my life, it's like, oh, this is good. Like, give me feedback. Like, I want to get better. Like, this is a part of like how I've been trained and developed to think. Some of us have never been in those scenarios. Maybe you're not an athlete and you didn't grow up being coached all the time. If you haven't and you're hesitant out of insecurity, push past that barrier and just say, hey, I want to be coachable because it will save me years, literally years on my leading my self-development process. There's a bunch of other things for me to say, but I want to say one thing that people don't often hear in leadership development, especially in the Christian spaces. Your basic responsibilities in life are a part of this process. For example, cleaning your house, doing dishes, managing your money, doing your laundry, learning how to cook. Like, this is just the basics of life. Honestly, those things end up being a parallel reality in leadership. Because if we can't take care of the basic responsibilities in our house, in our family, managing money, all of those things become a microcosm of who we actually become in leadership. So if we're lazy in like the basics of life, we become lazy in cutting corners in different areas of our leadership. But if we're not, if we're attentive, if we care about how we function in our home, how we function in the basic responsibilities of life, that will bleed into our leadership someday. For example, if you just don't care about how you spend or save money, and 15 years from now you're leading a church that has a $4 million budget, how you've lived up until that point with money will affect how you lead with the money in the church. If you don't care about the basics of taking care of your house or your family, there's going to be things in leadership that you're just like, oh, it doesn't matter. But it does matter. And I think this is, some of us were just like, oh, I want to just be famous and be influential, and I want everybody to listen to my sermons or my leadership talks. I would say that is so far down the line of importance than just saying, I actually want to become a healthy, whole, responsible, thriving human being that follows Jesus. Like, that's your goal. Am I doing that? Am I becoming like Jesus? Am I developing my skills? Am I being faithful and consistent? Am I becoming self-aware? Am I available to take on these opportunities that God's given me? Am I forming my identity, understanding my calling, actually understanding the state of my heart and my values and my motives? Am I doing all of those things? Because those things will lead to health and faithfulness in the larger things. So, my encouragement to you, for somebody who's been doing this for over 20 years, is focus on that. That might not be like the coolest thing, the most vibey thing, the thing that's going to get you a platform, but really, who cares about a platform? Like, this is what's going to make you feel right and healthy and whole and at peace in your soul. And this is the thing that's going to bless everyone around you, and later on will be the values and overflow of how you lead, if and when God gives you a larger platform. So, my encouragement to you guys is just focus on this stuff. Like, form who you are as a person in healthy ways. The bigger things like identity, the smaller things like taking care of your house and paying your bills and managing money, and everything in between. These are foundational layers to healthy long-term leadership. So that's number one, lead yourself. And again, I got so many things that I'd like to say, but I'm just trying to hit like the highlight points. The second part is leading others. So stage one is lead yourself, because if you can't lead yourself effectively, you can't lead others effectively. And if you bypass leading yourself, eventually there's going to be revelation in your ministry, unveiling in your leadership that you forgot to lead yourself, and your leadership of others is way ahead of your leadership of self. We all have this. I was watching that Hillsong documentary on, what was the last one? Not Netflix, it was on something. What was it on? Hulu. It was on Hulu, the 3-part one. And I was watching it, and all of us, all my pastor friends, we were texting each other like, oh my goodness, like, first of all, it was so good. I loved the humility and the rawness of it, especially around the lenses. Carl and I knew each other and briefly chatted a bit. We were in a magazine, outreach magazine back in the day as young megachurch pastors in America. And he was genuinely, like, my interaction with him was just like a really nice guy. Like, really nice guy. And I remember in the documentary, I don't know if you guys have watched it, but in the documentary, he basically was communicating that the growth of the church had outpaced where he was in his health as a leader. There were some fundamental things missing, undealt with, not tapped into, that his influence was so large, but there was fundamental realities inside of his life, or that he hadn't yet processed in his life, that were make or break realities under the surface. And I guess I tell you that story not to shame him, because I so appreciate his honesty and his vulnerability and his humility in that documentary. And I just think we're living in this awful shame culture that I just think is the antithesis of the gospel in so many ways. I understand the accountability, but I think we've gone too far. I say that just to say, take care of that stuff now. Form that stuff now. Get that stuff right now. Work on that stuff now. You don't have to be perfect right now. You don't have to have it all together. Even us who have been doing this a long time, we are not perfect and we don't have it all together. But if you want to do this well for the long haul, you have to have some intentionality with yourself before you have intentionality with other people. And I think that documentary is so good to think about, to consider for all of us, not so that we shame or, cast aspersion on that family who is in this beautiful moment of redemption, but just so that we take inventory of our own self-leadership. Leading others is technical, right? And I would say leading others is an overflow of our own self-leadership. So here's some things, just bullet points to write down about leading others. If you want to lead others well, start serving others well. Just be a servant. Like, that is the essence of good leadership. Just everywhere you're at, just serve the people around you. I think the older I've gotten, the more that I'm focused on this. Like, I just want to serve people. I just want to help people. I just want to encourage people. I just want to be a blessing to people. I just want to live for other people's flourishing. I don't want my leadership to be for my flourishing. I want it to be for other people's flourishing. So I guess another way to put this is become an asset to everyone else's life. That's how you lead other people. Not you're an asset to me, because that's how some of us look at leadership, right? Like, I looked at leadership like that. Like, oh, you're on my team, you're going to be an asset to me. No. If you're a really effective leader of other people, this is how you view it. I'm an asset to you, and to you, and to you, and to you. And how can I bless you? How can I cause you to flourish? How can I cause you to grow? How can I cause you to be in a state of health in your discipleship to Jesus? How can I see you get the limelight and people celebrate you? That is what it means to lead other people. And when you have a leader like that, everybody will follow. You will have droves of people lining up to be a part of your leadership team or to follow you, because they know that you want them to be well, that you want them to do well, that you're doing what you do so that they can do what they do as a follower of Jesus in a way that is flourishing and healthy and whole. So I think do that. Like, everywhere you go. It's like, even in Christianity, this isn't the norm. Like, this isn't the way that most of us think. Like, I remember when I was building a team in my mid-ish 20s of a fast-growing church. By the way, don't pastor a church in your 20s. It's just all kinds of problems with that. But I remember I'm like, oh, I want you because you're great at this and you're going to be an asset to me, and I want you because you're great at this and you're going to be an asset to me. I wish that I would have known then that my job was simply to be an asset to all those people. I wish I would have known that. So that's why I'm telling you guys, because that's like, something that has been a huge shift in my mindset of what leading other people look like. So if you have a flock of 10, just bless them, serve them, be an asset to them. If you have 20 people, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, or one, whoever's in front of you, that's the person you are to serve and be an asset to their growth and development as a disciple of Jesus. That's leading other people. I think also a part of this is discovering your leadership strength. Like, what is it that you're good at? I remember, 2009, 10, 11, 12, as I'm leading this church that I planted in my mid-20s, I remember there were so many different voices of leadership that were way ahead of me and that had like massive churches that I was like, oh my goodness, okay, you're doing that, you say that, so I'm going to do that. Or you're doing that and you're telling everybody to do that, so I'm going to do that. And I tried to wear so many different hats that weren't the size of my head, so to speak, that didn't fit on my head. And I was like, oh man, like me doing that and not being that only caused problems. Instead of me just being like, okay, God, how did you make me? What are my strengths? What are you really calling me to pour 70% of my energy into? Because most of us, at most, will get 70% of our energy poured into our strength and 30, sometimes a little more, poured into the other stuff and responsibilities. God, what is it that I'm really good at that I can help people in? I try to be like boss and manager because everybody's like, be a boss and manager. Don't be friends with the people that you lead with. Like, I was hearing all these, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do that. It didn't work out. And then I learned you're not like big boss style leadership. You're not managerial leadership. You're just a pastor who wants to see people flourish. And you're good at developing leaders and cultivating leaders. Just do that. And with your staff, just pastor them and love them and encourage them and fight for their growth and their well-being and their flourishing in Jesus. Like, be that person because that's how I've wired you. Now, some of you might be managerial and strategic and, be able to do all of that stuff. Figure that out as fast as you can and lean into that. Because that's going to cultivate who you really are as a leader. Like, figure out your secret sauce, the image of God, how God's wired you, how God's designed you, and really start to lean into that and allow that to be the culture of your leadership, because that's what's going to produce a lot of fruit. If you're not a great preacher, don't try to be a great preacher. Develop the skill, build your communication, but maybe that's not you. If you're not a great leadership development person, don't pour all your energy into that. If you're really good at like building systems and seeing all the strategy, pour yourself into that. Like, figure out how you have been designed in your strengths as leaders and pour out your energy into that. And here's just a warning. Don't try to be the person that has most influenced you, or the podcaster, or the famous Bible teacher that you love to listen to. Don't try to be that person, because God did not create you to be that person. God created you to be you, and being you will be the most effective form of leadership that you have. And you can rest in that and be content in that and be at peace with that. I got a ton more about this. Can I say one more thing about learning to lead others? Is that okay? Be comfortable with your humanness. You're like, what do you mean by that? That you're just a human, that you're imperfect, that you're flawed, that you go through hard moments, that you suffer, that you have anxiety, that you're insecure sometimes, that you're discouraged. Like, be comfortable with your humanness, because that is a magnet to leading others. People are drawn to that. When you share your honest, real stuff, and there's wisdom in sharing it, right? But when you're vulnerable with people, vulnerability is a bridge from one heart to another heart. When people see a leader that's not like, oh, I'm so perfect and I've got it all together and my family's flawless and my life is flawless, my devotional life is flawless and I'm just amazing and I'm polished, people look at that and they say, I can't relate to that because I know that's not me. And that actually makes me to feel discouraged because I feel like I'll never get there. But when people see me and they're just like, oh man, he's suffered and he's struggled and he's made mistakes and he's failed and he's gone through it and he's imperfect and he doesn't have it all together and he misses days in his devotional life, like they're like, whoa, that's me. Like maybe I can be that because that's something that I can relate to. That's something that I experience. That's the inner dialogue that I have in my life. Like, be that person. Because when you're vulnerable, people want to follow that. When you're a leader who people look up to, but you're also human and honest and real and raw with wisdom in how you share that, but just, I would say, in my life, if I'm going to lean on one spectrum or the other, I'm going to lean on the spectrum of being vulnerable than non-vulnerable, unguarded than guarded, because that's where people's hearts connect, and that's where people really start to follow you. So when you lead others, be a servant, be an asset, discover your strengths, lead into them, and be comfortable with your own humanity and uniqueness and quirks, because we all have them. That's what makes you awesome, is you and your quirkiness and all that makes you you. That's the sauce of your leadership. Every great leader I know is very quirky. Like if you really know them, and I know some of the people that you listen to and the books you read, and they're all just humans and they got struggles and challenges and discouragements, and you would be surprised how many great leaders are insecure. Not insecure in an unhealthy way, but they never feel like they've made it. They feel like they're not good enough. They feel like maybe what they're doing is not as effective as they want it to be. Like, it's really common. So just be that person, and God will use that in a beautiful and redemptive way. And then finally, only a couple of thoughts on this. Learn to lead yourself, learn to lead others, and learn to lead leaders. You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. You can't lead leaders if you can't lead yourself and others. Does that make sense? This is a whole different experience and skill of leadership when you're leading other leaders. Because honestly, for example, if you're in a room of like high caliber leaders and you come into the room and you don't have a plan or a vision for a meeting, no high caliber leader wants to follow that. They're going to just be like, what are we doing? I don't know what we're doing. I can't follow that. Like, if you come into a group of leaders and you're not leading yourself in the basic responsibilities of your life, and they're like, oh, wow, like, you don't know how to manage your money? Like, you don't know how to, pay your credit card each month or what have you? The leaders that are going to follow you need a leader who has built their leadership development from the ground up, so that they can look to you not as perfect, not as flawless, not as I got it all together, but they can look to you as, whoa, you've developed enough that I have a trust and a respect for you that I want to follow you. I don't know if I could have said that at 25, 26, 27, 28 years old. I was doing it, but I wish I would have known all this stuff. I wish I would have leaned into this stuff and become aware of it a lot earlier. So, how do we lead leaders effectively? First, you got to lead yourself. Second, you got to learn the art and skill and essence of leading others. But third, there's a number of factors that I think are really important in leading leaders. First of all, I think it's this. You've got to be able to identify your unique gifting to lead other leaders. What is it that you have that not people will follow, but leaders will follow? I think for me, even with leaders, it's the ability to encourage them, to value them, and to develop them. even leaders. I did a leadership cohort with a bunch of like business leaders. Like one of the guys works for DOJ, the state of California. He leads an entire branch of the DOJ as a lawyer of the state of California. And we went through 10 things I wish I would have known as a leader. I just want to pass on to the leaders in our church. We went through this. And he said, this guy's like high caliber. He said, Wesley, this is the most I've ever learned about leadership in my life. And they're all Jesus principles. And he's like, without saying it, I'm taking this to the DOJ, and I'm just training all of our leaders in the DOJ with this stuff without saying, oh, this comes from the Bible, or this comes from the life of Jesus, or what have you. And I was like so encouraged. I wasn't like, oh yeah, of course, like my stuff is awesome. No, I was like, wow, like that's really encouraging, because I feel like God has said, this is what you have, that leaders will feel encouraged, built up, and developed. Like this is your unique addition and asset into their lives. And I'm learning that as I get older, that there's this thing that God has given me where leaders feel like they're growing, but they feel like they're encouraged at the same time. And whatever that is for you, it might take some time to figure it out. Like you might be in stage 1 leading yourself, which is awesome and good and right and healthy and whole, and don't be discouraged. You might be in stage 2 where you're leading others and you need to go back to stage 1 and, work on some stuff and the construction process of that part of your life. In that process, stage 1 and stage 2, ask the Lord, God, what have you given me that someday leaders will really want to follow me? And that's not something for yourself. It's not self-serving. Like it's other people serving. And then just do that. Like build into those leaders with that gift that you have. It might be teaching. It might be your intellectual ability. It might be your ability to inspire people with vision. It might be your strategic nature. It might be your ability to raise up and develop other people in discipleship and leadership. Whatever it is, like, it might be your compassion and your love and your care and just making people feel like they're seen and known and understood. Like whatever that is, really lean into it. The second part of it is this. It's not just your gift internally. It's your unique experiences that become an asset to leaders. So not only identify your unique gifting to lead leaders, but identify your unique experiences that will allow you to lead leaders. So what experiences have you had coalescing in your life where now you can draw those together and you can lead high caliber leaders? Like you want good leaders around you someday. You want people of equal skill or even greater skill in other areas than yourself. Don't feel insecure about that. Realize that that's going to be an asset to everything that you're doing. And there's going to be unique experiences along the way. For example, me leading a church at a really young age that grew to be really large. I think I learned 2 things. I learned through that experience what I did right and what I did wrong. And when I share what I did wrong with high caliber leaders, you can see things click. Like that experience is actually advantageous for me sharing with, pouring into, encouraging, helping lead leaders. They connect with things. They're like, oh my goodness, I'm experiencing that right now. What did you do as you reflected? How would you re-engineer? If you went back, what would you do different? Like those experiences create conversations that are advantageous to leading other leaders. And then here's a couple things I've learned. When you're leading leaders, relationships are everything. Like if you have the CEO of Apple, if you have the CEO of Instagram on your leadership team, like your relationship with them, that's everything. Everything else flows out of that relationship. Most of them, they don't want to talk shop all the time. They don't want to talk, work and how great things are going or how bad things are going or how successful they are. They just want a real relationship with another leader that they can build relational bridges with, talk honest life and family and what's happening in their spiritual life with. That is so foundational. When you're leading leaders, be humble. Great leaders don't want to be led by somebody that's prideful. They want to be led by somebody that's humble. And then I think you lead them with love. Like, make them feel a sense of warmth. You guys know what I mean by that? Like, a lot of us, we're just like, do this and let's go and we're charging the mountain. And then there's other leaders that are like, wow, when I'm around them, like, I feel loved. Like, I feel cared for. Leaders want that. Believe it or not. I lead people in my churches that I pastored that are leading companies of massive amounts of employees, millions of dollars a month, like super successful. You know what they all want from me? Relationship and love. That's it. Relationship and love. That becomes the platform by which you lead them well, and they want to follow you. There's a guy in my church right now, super successful. He's patented so many things, medical devices, ran large companies. Every time I meet with him, he's become a really close friend of mine. Every time I meet with him, it's all relationship and it's all love. Like, that's it. And this dude's like, I mean, he's older now. He was a college wrestler. Like, he's like, if you didn't know him, you're like intimidated of this guy. Big business mogul. But the essence of our relationship isn't, oh, let's be strategic. What can I learn from you? What can you learn from me? It's mostly just like relationship, love, honesty, vulnerability, connection. And I just think that's so important to learn about leading leaders, because most of us, we're intimidated. We're intimidated leading other leaders who are skilled. Don't be intimidated. Go right to their heart. Care about them as a person. Build a relationship. Love them. Value them. Encourage them. And ask lots of questions to learn from them, because if you're around other really skilled and experienced leaders, they're not on your team following you just because they think you have all the answers. They have a lot of the answers that you don't see, that if you invite them into the conversation, you will see. That's so, so important. There's a bunch of other things like leading with character and conviction, making decisions out of your values and convictions, collaborating with vision, developing the leaders in front of you who become those people on your squad, being trustworthy, faithful, all those things like are important in leading leaders. But I think the essence of what I said at the beginning of this third progression of leadership is the heart of it. I think those things, those 5 things I shared, if you do them well, this is some of the secret influence of leading leaders. It's not hard. A lot of this stuff isn't hard. Let's demystify a lot of leadership here. But it just takes practice and intentionality and growth to get really good at it. Does that make sense?